The neon sign of the truck stop parking lot, 2A, wrong truck pulsed a sickly green, a beacon in the bruised velvet of the night. Rain slicked the asphalt, reflecting the garish glow like 1,000 shattered emeralds. I nursed a lukewarm coffee, the bitter grounds clinging to the bottom of the paper cup, a familiar grit mirroring the one in my soul. Years had weathered me, scoured away the sharp edges of the detective I once was, leaving behind a dull ache and a quiet resignation. My days now were spent tracing the faint whispers of forgotten cases, the ones that refused to stay buried, the ones that clawed at the edges of my sleep. A rumble vibrated through the worn linoleum floor of the diner, a low growl that promised movement. The air hung thick with the scent of stale grease and desperation. Outside, a behemoth of chrome and steel, a semi-truck, idled with an unnatural stillness. Its engine purred, a predator waiting to strike, its trailer a dark, unreadable monolith. It wasn't the truck I was waiting for. The dispatcher's voice, tinny and strained, had been clear, a blue Peterbilt license plate ending in 74B. This beast was a charcoal gray Freightliner, a mistake. I pushed away from the sticky Formica table, the cheap plastic chair scraping a protest. As I stepped out into the drizzle, the air bit at my exposed skin. The truck's driver, a hulking silhouette against the faint interior light, was a stranger. He stood by the open driver's side door, a shape of solid, unyielding mass. My gaze swept across the deserted lot. A few other rigs sat dormant, their drivers lost to dreams or the cheap comfort of sleep. The silence was profound, broken only by the rhythmic hiss of the rain and the distant groan of the highway. Then a flicker of movement near the rear of the Freightliner caught my eye. Not the driver, someone else. My gut clenched. This wasn't how the meeting was supposed to go. The plan was simple. A quick exchange, a few hushed words, and then I'd be back on the road, the ghost of my past a little less tangible. But the wrong truck, the unseen presence. It all felt like a discordant note in a symphony of caution. I moved, my steps deliberate, each footfall a soft splash in the puddles. The stranger by the door hadn't reacted, his back still to me, his attention seemingly fixed on something inside the cab. My eyes narrowed, tracing the movement I'd seen. A glint of metal, a deliberate practiced action, the serial killer, the ghost, his modus operandi, the meticulous planning, a clandestine meeting, a wrong turn, and a phantom in the rain. I kept my hands visible, my movements slow, non-threatening. "Hey," I called out, my voice raspy, barely audible above the rain. The silhouette by the door turned, a slow, deliberate pivot. His face remained obscured by the brim of a cap, but the bulk of his frame was undeniable. He didn't answer. He simply stood there, a silent sentinel. The figure near the trailer's rear, however, moved. They held something small and metallic, something that caught the neon light for a fleeting second. It was a tool, small and specialized. My breath hitched. My mind raced, piecing together the fragmented images, the unsettling similarities. This wasn't just a case of mistaken identity. This was a message, or worse, a prelude. The hulking driver finally spoke, his voice a low rumble, devoid of emotion. "You're not the one I'm expecting." My gaze flicked between the two figures. The one by the trailer was now retreating, melting back into the obscurity from which they'd emerged. The glint of metal was gone. The rain continued its relentless descent, washing over the asphalt, over the wrong truck, over the sudden realization that the nightmare was far from over. It had merely found a new stage, and I was once again center spotlight. The stench of stale diesel and desperation clung to me like a shroud. The truck stop parking lot, 2 a.m., wrong truck a fitting stage for my re-entry into the muck. The retreating figure had vanished, swallowed by the oppressive dark that clung to the edges of the lot. The glint of metal was gone, but the image was seared behind my eyelids, a sliver of moonlight-catching polished steel, a silent promise of violence. My breath hitched. This wasn't just a botched job, this was familiar, too familiar. The precision, the chilling anonymity. My hands, calloused and rough from years of digging in the dirt, flexed at my sides. A low hum vibrated through the soles of my worn boots, the distant rumble of engines a counterpoint to the frantic thrumming in my chest. I shouldn't be here. I'd sworn I was done. I walked towards the abandoned truck, its trailer a hulking silhouette against the bruised velvet sky. A flicker of unease, a phantom limb ache of caution pricked at me. This was a mistake. It was the same glint. Stepping inside, I was met with the stale, metallic tang of something spilled. Not oil, something thicker, richer. I ran a gloved finger along the dashboard. Dust. A thick, undisturbed layer save for a single, clean swipe near the ignition. Someone had been here recently. Someone who knew what they were doing. My gaze swept over the cab. A half-eaten sandwich lay on the passenger seat, a testament to interrupted routine. I knelt, the rough fabric scratching against my jeans. The smell was acrid, almost sweet, not coffee. I pulled a small high-powered flashlight from my jacket pocket, its beam cutting a sharp swath through the gloom. The spilled substance was a deep, almost black crimson. My stomach tightened. I'd seen that color before, too many times. The details of that last case, the one that had broken me, flooded back with sickening clarity. The meticulous planning, the almost surgical precision of the perpetrator, and the victims. I moved to the trailer, the heavy metal door groaning in protest as I pulled it open. The beam of my flashlight danced across stacks of crates, each one identical, stamped with a generic logo I didn't recognize. This wasn't just a random truck, a random stop. This was a delivery, a carefully orchestrated exchange. It was smaller than the spill in the cab, more concentrated. I leaned closer, the beam illuminating faint, almost imperceptible scratches on the concrete around it, as if something heavy had been dragged. My pulse quickened. This was more than just a hunch now. This was a breadcrumb. Among the crates tucked away in a corner, I spotted it. A single discarded glove, not the cheap latex kind. I'd seen that stitching before, in a photograph, a crime scene photograph. This was no coincidence. This was him, or someone who knew him. Someone who wore his methods like a second skin. I picked up the glove, carefully placing it in a plastic evidence bag I'd foresightedly tucked into my coat. The leather was still slightly warm to the touch. My mind raced, piecing together the fragments. The wrong truck, the spilled substance, the scratches, the glove. I was walking back into the storm, and this time the stakes felt impossibly higher. The weight of my past failures pressed down on me, a suffocating blanket. But beneath the fear, a flicker of something else ignited a fierce, desperate resolve. I wouldn't let him win again, not this time. The truck stop parking lot, 2 a.m., wrong truck, offered no answers, only the lingering phantom scent of oil and regret. The retreating figure, a whisper of movement in the periphery, had dissolved into the night. The glint of metal, the metallic tang that had pricked my nostrils, was gone. Just the low thrum of idling engines and the distant sigh of tires on asphalt. I stood there, a statue carved from doubt, the stale air filling my lungs, each breath a reminder of the life I'd tried to shed. My fingers traced the cool, unyielding steel of the truck's trailer. No forced entry, no obvious signs of tampering, just the hollow echo of an empty space where something significant had once resided. This wasn't a smash and grab. This was precision. This was a ghost's work. A weary sigh escaped my lips. I hadn't asked for this. It wasn't just rumors. It was a pattern, a terrifyingly familiar pattern. I pulled my collar tighter against the biting wind, the rough wool scratching at my stubbled chin. The previous incident, the one at the warehouse, had been a warning. This one at the truck stop felt like a direct challenge, but to whom? To the authorities who had long since washed their hands of me. Or to me, Cole, the man who had promised never to look back. Each flicker seemed to mock my efforts, illuminating nothing but my own isolation. I kicked at a loose piece of gravel, the small sound unnervingly loud in the stillness. My gut twisted. If this was him, if it was the same ghost, then the stakes had just been raised. Considerably. I needed to move. The longer I lingered, the more I risked drawing unwanted attention. The smell of fried food and stale coffee was a welcome, if grim. Familiarity. A uniformed officer, his face etched with fatigue, sat at the counter, nursing a mug. He glanced at me, a flicker of recognition, then dismissal. I was just another face in the periphery, a man who didn't belong. Good. That was exactly how I wanted it. My gaze swept over the diner's sparse patrons. A lone trucker, his face buried in a newspaper. A couple of young women, their laughter too loud, too brittle. No one of interest. No one who looked like they belonged in the same orbit as what had just transpired. I ordered a black coffee, the bitterness of familiar comfort. As I waited, my mind replayed the details of the warehouse, the truck stop. The stolen goods were different electronic components from the warehouse, a high-value cargo from the truck, but the method, the utter lack of evidence, that was the same. It was the signature. The coffee arrived, scalding hot. I wrapped my hands around the ceramic mug. Seeking warmth, the officer at the counter shifted, his radio crackling to life. A low murmur of voices, too indistinct to decipher. Nothing. Then a news report playing softly from a television mounted in the corner snagged my attention. The anchor's voice, smooth and professional, spoke of a daring theft. Not the warehouse, not the truck. Something bigger. Something that would undoubtedly bring the wolves out in force. Authorities are currently investigating a sophisticated breach at the city's main art gallery. The anchor announced, her tone grave. Valuable artifacts, including the renowned Serpent's Eye diamond, have been stolen overnight. The precision of the operation has left investigators baffled, with no signs of forced entry and no witnesses. My hand tightened around the mug, the ceramic groaning under the pressure. The Serpent's Eye. the city's crown jewel. This wasn't just a pattern anymore. This was an escalation. A brazen, terrifying escalation. The gallery, the diamond. It was too much of a coincidence. It was him. The officer at the counter stood up, his face now a mask of professional concern. He spoke briefly to the diner's owner, then headed out into the night, his stride purposeful. The news report continued, detailing the immense value of the stolen items, the public outcry, the inevitable pressure on the department. And the department, I knew, would be looking for answers. They would be looking for anyone who understood this kind of work. Anyone who had dealt with this kind of ghost before. They would be looking for me. The art gallery. This was no longer about some abstract justice or a ghost from my past. This was about lives, about the city. The stakes had just become a whole lot more personal and infinitely more dangerous. The hum of the refrigerated trailer was a low thrum against the pre-dawn stillness. I leaned against the cool metal, the grit of the truck stop parking lot, 2 a.m. wrong truck clinging to my worn soles. The air tasted of diesel and stale coffee, a familiar, unwelcome perfume. My fingers traced the condensation blooming on the thermos in my hand, a desperate attempt to ground myself. The serpent's eye, the gallery, the diamond. The whispers of the serpent, a phantom I'd chased into the abyss years ago, were growing louder. A flicker of movement by the row of 18-wheelers caught my eye. A silhouette hunched against the weak glow of the security lights, not the usual late-night trucker grabbing a bite. This one moved with a predator's economy, a stillness that felt wrong. I pushed off the trailer, my boots crunching on loose gravel. Every instinct screamed caution, a honed sense I'd tried to bury but couldn't quite kill. Looking for someone? My voice was a low rasp, testing the air. The figure straightened, turning slowly. A woman. Her face was obscured by shadow, but the tilt of her head, the way she held herself, was sharp, precise. She didn't flinch. "Just admiring the chrome," she replied, her voice smooth, devoid of inflection. A professional observer, I could feel it. This late and in this lot. I took a step closer, my gaze sweeping the area. No other figures. No idling engines that didn't belong. Just the vast, sleeping metal beasts and this woman, a solitary sentinel. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she gestured with a gloved hand towards the highway, the distant headlights of passing cars blurring into streaks. They're all moving, always moving, searching for something. Her words snagged on a nerve, searching. That's what I was doing, searching for a phantom. And I asked, my voice hardening. What are I searching for? A faint smile, almost imperceptible in the gloom. Answers, aren't we all? She produced a small, worn, leather-bound notebook from her jacket, not a casual jotting. This was a tool. She opened it, her fingers brushing over the pages. The serpent's eye, a bold move, much bolder than the others. My breath hitched. She knew about the serpent. Others. The jewelry store on Elm, the private collection in the West End, and now the gallery, each target. Unique. Each meticulously chosen. She flipped a page, her gaze distant. But there's a thread, isn't there? A pattern if I look closely enough. I waited, my own internal ledger flipping through the scant details I'd pieced together. The jewelry store had been a small, independent shop known for its antique pieces. The West End collection was a private vault belonging to a reclusive industrialist filled with rare artifacts. And the serpent's eye, a legendary diamond, a symbol of the city's wealth now gone. The commonality, the woman continued, her voice a quiet murmur that seemed to carry on the night air, is not just the value, it's the significance. The jewelry store held a piece commissioned by the city's first mayor. The industrialist's collection included a ceremonial dagger rumored to have belonged to the founding family. It was part of the original city charter display, a symbol of ownership. Ownership. The word echoed in the vastness of my mind. Not just wealth, not just prestige, but a reclaiming, a defiance. The serpent wasn't just stealing, he was erasing. And what does that mean to I asked, my voice tight. She finally met my gaze, and in the faint light I saw a flash of something that wasn't fear, wasn't greed. It means he's not just taking things, detective. He's rewriting history, or perhaps he's reminding us of a history we've tried to forget. My gut twisted. Detective. She'd called me detective. I hadn't been one for 5 years, not since the serpent's first dance with the city, the one that left me shattered, and the killer a ghost. How do I know that name? I demanded, my hand instinctively reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. She closed the notebook with a soft snap. I've been watching for a long time, and I've seen how certain legacies are preserved and how others are. Her departure was as silent as her arrival. Ownership, dismantled legacies. The serpent wasn't just a thief. He was an architect of chaos, and his blueprint was etched in the very foundations of this city. And I, Cole, the disgraced former detective, was the only one left who knew the original design. This was no longer about stolen jewels. This was about something far more profound and far more dangerous. The air in the truck stop parking lot, 2 a.m. Wrong truck hung thick with the stale perfume of exhaust and stale coffee. My breath plumed in the chill, a visible ghost against the bruised indigo of the night. She'd vanished, leaving only the echo of her words and the unsettling hum of the idling engines. Ownership, dismantled legacies. The serpent, not a phantom but a planner, a ghost with a blueprint. I hadn't moved for what felt like an eternity. My hand, still clenched around the cold metal of the thermos, ached with a phantom grip. The sudden departure of the stranger, the one with eyes like chipped obsidian, had rattled me more than I cared to admit. She knew things she shouldn't, or perhaps things I'd forgotten. The serpent's M.O. was etched into my memory, a scar that refused to fade. The precision, the audacity, it was all there, laid bare in the stolen artifacts, the meticulously chosen targets. But this felt different. A new layer to the old nightmare. A flicker of movement at the far end of the lot caught my eye. A shadow detaching itself from the bulk of a parked 18-wheeler, too deliberate to be a traveler stretching their legs, too still to be a truck driver on a smoke break. My gut tightened, a familiar clench that had served me well in my former life. I'd been pulled back into this cesspool, and it seemed the water was deeper and murkier than I'd anticipated. I pushed myself off the hood of the sedan, the metal groaning a protest against my weight. My boots crunched on gravel, each step a deliberate sound in the vast, empty quiet. The figure remained in place, a silhouette against the faint glow of the lot lights. He wore a thick, oil-stained jacket, the kind that spoke of long hours spent wrestling with stubborn machinery. He didn't turn immediately. The silence stretched, taut as a violin string. Then slowly he pivoted. The light caught his face, revealing a weathered visage, a roadmap of hard living etched into his skin. His eyes, when they met mine, held a weary glint, but there was a sharpness there, too, a flicker of recognition that sent a shiver down my spine. "Depends on who's asking," he rumbled, his voice a low growl. "Cole." I offered my name, a small concession in the face of his guarded posture. "I'm looking for information about a recent acquisition." I chose my words carefully, avoiding any direct mention of the serpent. He spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the asphalt. "Acquisition sounds like a fancy word for theft. Call it what I will, it's been making noise." I watched his reaction, searching for any tell, any tremor of unease. A slow smile spread across his lips, a humorless baring of teeth. "Noise? This whole damn industry's a symphony of noise, pal. I gotta be more specific." He took a step closer, his presence suddenly more imposing. I could smell the faint, metallic tang of oil and something else, something acrid, like old sweat and cheap whiskey. "A specific piece," I pressed. "Something old, something." This man, he was a fixer, someone who knew where things went, who paid top dollar for the truly illicit. He was connected to the periphery of the case that had broken me. His eyes narrowed, the weariness momentarily replaced by a shrewd assessment. "I read digging in old graves, Cole. Some things are better left buried. Some things refuse to stay down," I countered, my own voice hardening. He chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "I think I'm the one who'll tell I where the serpent's nest is. I re mistaken. I just haul the damn eggs, I don't know where they're laid." The serpent's name, he'd said it, not as a question, but as a statement of fact. My pulse quickened, a drumbeat against my ribs. This was it, the connection. "I know him," I stated, not a question. He shrugged, a deliberate casualness that felt performative. "Know of him. Everyone in this business knows of him. He's a ghost who leaves fingerprints, a paradox." He met my gaze again, and this time there was a definite edge of something else. Fear, or was it amusement? "He's using the same methods," I said, my voice low and urgent. "The same meticulous planning, the same signature." His smile widened, revealing a gap where a tooth should have been. "Methods change, Cole. Times change. Maybe someone just got inspired." He reached into his jacket, and my hand instinctively went to my side, where my own forgotten weapon used to rest. He pulled out a crumpled pack of cigarettes, fumbling for a lighter. "Inspired by what?" I demanded, my patience wearing thin. He lit his cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating the grime under his fingernails. "By success, I reckon. By the fact that some people never learn. I was supposed to be the one who caught him, weren't I? What happened, detective?" The question hung in the air, a barbed hook. It was a jab, a reminder of my failure of the case that had cost me everything. I felt a prickle of anger, hot and sharp, but I forced it down. This was not about my pride. This was about stopping him. "That's none of my business," I said, my voice tight. He took a long drag, the tip of the cigarette glowing an angry ember. "And I think this is my business. I think I want that kind of attention. The serpent, he's a snake. I tread on him, I get bit hard." He flicked ash onto the ground. "I read looking in the wrong place, Cole. This ain't about the past." He exhaled a cloud of smoke, his eyes glinting in the dim light. The girl I saw earlier, she's the one who knows, but she's not talking to the likes of me anymore. A massive semi-truck, its headlights blazing like predatory eyes, began to reverse, its trailer swinging wide. I stumbled back, the sudden movement jarring me. The truck's trailer brushed past, inches from my face, the wind it generated whipping my coat. The man beside me, the fixer, was gone, vanished into the sudden chaos of the reversing behemoth. I was alone again, the scent of diesel now acrid, suffocating. He hadn't just misdirected me, he'd actively set me up. This wasn't a setback. This was a trap sprung shut. The roar of the semi-truck's engine vibrated through the soles of my worn boots. A beast awakening in the desolate expanse of the truck stop parking lot. 2 a.m., wrong truck. Its headlights, twin beams of blinding white, swept across the cracked asphalt, catching the glint of spilled diesel and the skeletal silhouettes of parked rigs. I scrambled backward, the scent of stale coffee and exhaust fumes thick in the frigid air. The trailer's colossal form swung, a pendulum of steel, threatening to crush the very ground I stood on. This wasn't the rendezvous. This was a distraction, a violent, deafening interruption. My breath hitched, a ragged sound in the sudden void left by the engine's fading rumble. The truck, a hulking shadow now, had stopped its retrograde dance, its trailer positioned between me and the alley where the informant had vanished. A deliberate maneuver. A cage, nothing. Only the hum of distant refrigeration units and the mournful sigh of wind through the sparse, skeletal trees bordering the lot. He knows about I. Who was he? The serial killer, the ghost I chased for years, or someone new, someone playing a far more dangerous game? This felt personal. This felt like a message. I edged closer to the parked truck, the cold metal a stark contrast to the heat building in my chest. My eyes scanned the trailer's surface, searching for a license plate, a company logo, anything to identify this metal behemoth that had so rudely interrupted my pursuit. The paint was a dull, anonymous gray, scuffed and scarred from countless miles. No markings, no clue. Then I saw it, a faint, almost imperceptible smudge near the rear latch. I knelt, my fingers brushing against the gritty surface. It wasn't dirt. It was a residue, a faint, powdery film. I brought my hand closer, inhaling cautiously. A peculiar scent, sweet and cloying, like overripe fruit left too long in the sun, but with an underlying metallic tang. It pricked at a memory, a phantom limb of a forgotten detail. The informant had mentioned the killer's meticulous nature, how he left no trace, but there was always something. A scent, a specific tool, a preference for certain types of locks. I'd pored over the case files until the ink blurred, until the faces of the victims became a constant, gnawing ache. I stood, my mind racing. The heists were escalating. The targets were becoming bolder, and now this elaborate trap. They wanted me here in this desolate corner of the world under the indifferent gaze of a $2 clock, but why? My gaze drifted to the truck stop's diner, a beacon of flickering neon in the gloom. The informant had said he'd be waiting by the counter. He was supposed to give me a name, a location. Instead, I got a roaring truck and a scent I couldn't quite place. A quick search of recent heists, cross-referencing them with known associates of the killer. The perpetrators were ghosts, their faces obscured by masks, their movements fluid and practiced. They were professionals, yes, but the style, that was the killer's. My own demons stirred, the familiar weight of failure pressing down. Had I been too close? Had I missed something crucial all those years ago? The killer had vanished, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and shattered lives. And now it seemed he was back, or someone was wearing his mask. I walked slowly towards the diner, the crunch of gravel underfoot unnervingly loud. The scent from the truck still clung to my fingertips, a ghostly reminder. Overripe fruit, metallic tang. Where had I encountered that before? It was just on the edge of recall, a half-formed thought struggling to break through the fog of exhaustion and adrenaline. Inside the diner, the air was thick with the smell of frying bacon and stale coffee. A lone waitress, her hair a severe gray bun, wiped down the counter with practiced, weary strokes. No informant, no sign of anyone waiting, just the low murmur of a crackling radio and the rhythmic drip of a leaky faucet. I ordered a black coffee, the bitter heat a welcome jolt. My eyes scanned the sparse clientele, a tired-looking trucker nursing a plate of eggs, a young couple huddled in a booth, their faces illuminated by the glow of their phones. No one fit the profile. No one seemed out of place, yet the entire scene felt staged. The residue on my fingers, the cloying sweetness. Suddenly it clicked, not fruit, not entirely. It was a chemical compound, a specific preservative used in floral arrangements. The killer's victims had all been found with a single, wilting orchid placed on their chest. I dismissed it as a macabre flourish, a signature. But what if it was more? What if it was a clue to his trade? A preservative used to keep delicate things fresh, and the heists. They weren't just about money, were they? They were about acquisition, acquiring something specific. Something valuable, perhaps, but also something perishable. My mind flashed back to a detail from one of the early crime scenes, a detail I'd cataloged and filed away, deeming it irrelevant. A small, empty vial found near the victim, its label too degraded to read. I'd assumed it was a cleaning agent, something mundane, but the scent. The informant hadn't been intercepted, and the truck. The truck was a diversion, a way to ensure I'd be looking in the wrong direction while the real prize was moved. The heists weren't random. They were a collection. A collection of what and for whom? I paid for my coffee, the coins clinking in my palm. My gaze fell on a framed newspaper clipping behind the counter, yellowed and brittle. A local business award from 20 years ago. The Bloom Room Excellence in Floral Design. The owner's name was listed, a name I recognized, a name from my past. The pieces began to fall into place, sharp and painful. The precision, the signature, the scent, the motive. It wasn't just a killer wearing a mask. It was someone I knew, someone who knew me. And they were using the killer's MO to mask their own agenda, an agenda that was rapidly becoming terrifyingly clear. This wasn't about revenge. It was about creation. The cold bit at my exposed knuckles as I wrestled the truck's fuel cap open. 2 a.m. In the truck stop parking lot, 2 a.m. wrong truck. The air hung thick with diesel fumes and the phantom scent of stale coffee. My breath plumed in the weak glow of the flickering neon sign, a stark red beacon against the oppressive black. The informant was dead. And that truck, the one the informant had pointed me to, was a ghost. My gut churned with a familiar, bitter taste. This wasn't just about heists anymore. This was about a pattern, collection. What kind of sick collector am I dealing with? The informant had been thorough, had laid out his information with a precision that bordered on obsessive. He'd known I'd checked the truck. He'd known I'd be here, standing in the biting wind, staring at an empty fuel tank, a monument to my own misdirection. My hand instinctively went to the worn leather of my jacket, not for a weapon, but for the familiar weight of the burner phone tucked inside. I'd been careless, so damn careless. I'd focused on the mechanics of the heists, on the stolen goods, on the logistics, and I'd forgotten the most critical element, the human factor. The killer wasn't just playing with objects, they were playing with me. They moved with a disquieting grace, not hurried, but deliberate. My eyes narrowed. They weren't approaching me directly. They were heading for the diner, its windows radiating a sickly yellow light. They know about my sister, Sarah. Sarah worked at the diner. She always worked the night shift when I was out chasing ghosts. A small, insignificant detail I'd never given a second thought. Until now. I dropped the fuel nozzle, its clatter against the asphalt unnervingly loud in the stillness. My legs felt heavy, leaden, but I forced them to move, a desperate surge of adrenaline overriding the exhaustion that had settled deep in my bones. The distance to the diner seemed to stretch into miles, each step a struggle against an unseen current. The figure had reached the diner's entrance, pausing for a moment before slipping inside. My mind raced, a chaotic storm of possibilities. Was this a warning, a threat, or something far worse? The heists, the meticulously planned robberies, they were all designed to draw me out, to keep me occupied, to make me believe I was hunting a ghost. But the ghost had finally found me, and it wasn't interested in stolen jewels or untraceable currency. It was interested in what I held dear. I reached the diner door, my hand hovering over the handle. The smell of frying onions and stale coffee, usually a comforting aroma, now felt suffocating. Through the grimy glass, I saw the figure standing at the counter, speaking to the owner, a burly man with tired eyes. Sarah was in the back, the clatter of plates betraying her presence. This was no longer about redemption. This was about survival, not just mine, but hers. The killer had escalated. They had raised the stakes, not with a larger haul or a more audacious crime, but with a brutal personal blow. I pushed the door open, the bell above it jingling with a sound that felt like a death knell. My eyes scanned the room, a hunter's instinct kicking in, honed by years of navigating treacherous terrain. The figure at the counter turned, their face obscured by the dim lighting and the brim of a worn cap. But I saw it then, a flash of something familiar, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. A scar, faint but unmistakable, just above the left eyebrow. The same scar I'd seen on the grainy surveillance footage, the same scar that had haunted my dreams for years. The killer. They knew I was coming. They knew I'd follow the breadcrumbs, and they had laid this trap not for me to fall into but to watch me scramble, to watch me suffer. The owner, sensing the shift in the air, his gaze flicking between me and the stranger, took a step back. "Everything all right here?" I managed to ask, my voice rough, betraying the tremor I couldn't control. The figure didn't answer. They simply turned their eyes when they finally met mine were devoid of any warmth, any humanity. They were the eyes of a predator who had finally cornered its prey. And Sarah, my sister, was the bait. My breath hitched. This was it. The game had changed, and I was no longer the hunter. I was the hunted. The biting wind whipped across the expanse of the truck stop parking lot. 2 a.m. Wrong truck. It carried the metallic tang of diesel fumes and the faint, unsettling scent of something else. Something acrid and sweet like burnt sugar. My headlights, a pair of jaundiced eyes, cut through the oppressive dark, illuminating rows of hulking metal beasts. Each one was a potential vessel, a temporary tomb for secrets. Sarah, my sister. The word was a raw wound ripped open by the sudden, brutal insight. She worked the diner, a beacon of fluorescent warmth in the dead of night. My nights. The nights I'd spent chasing the phantom, the architect of despair. I'd seen her face in the smeared glass of 1,000 greasy windows, a fleeting ghost in my periphery. A detail so small, so utterly mundane, now it clawed at my throat. The fuel can slipped from my numb fingers, hitting the asphalt with a dull thud. It didn't matter. The fire in my gut was all the heat I needed. He was still out there, and he was using her. Not directly, not yet. But he was a thread, a fragile, silken strand leading back to him. I scanned the lot, my gaze sharp, honed by years of seeing what others missed. He was meticulous. That was his signature. Every move, a calculated step in a deadly dance. He wouldn't leave loose ends. He craved control, and Sarah. He was a loose end he decided to tie up. My mind raced, replaying the heists, the chilling precision. The way the security systems were bypassed, not brute force, but elegant, surgical strikes. He wouldn't expect me to connect Sarah. It was too personal, too outside his carefully constructed parameters. He saw me as a broken thing, a relic of a past he'd already buried. And perhaps in a way I was, but broken things could still bite. I needed to draw him out, to make him show his hand. He was a creature of habit, a performer who craved an audience even if it was just me. And my sister was his unwitting prop, the diner. It sat on the edge of the lot, a low-slung building with a neon sign buzzing a tired welcome. Sarah would be inside, wiping down counters, brewing coffee. Oblivious, a target, a plan began to coalesce, sharp and dangerous. It wasn't about catching him anymore, not directly. It was about disruption, about making him deviate from his script. My destination wasn't the diner, not yet. It was a derelict warehouse on the outskirts of town, a place I'd used before. The warehouse loomed, a skeletal silhouette against the bruised dawn sky. Inside, dust motes danced in the slivers of light that pierced the grimy windows. The air was thick with the ghosts of industry, a metallic tang that did nothing to mask the scent of decay. I worked quickly, my movements economical. I dragged out old crates, stacking them to create bottlenecks to funnel movement. I rigged a simple tripwire near the main entrance, a length of piano wire connected to a can of ball bearings. It wouldn't stop him, but it would announce his arrival. Then the bait. I placed a small, tarnished locket on a dusty workbench. Inside, a faded photograph of Sarah and me, grinning like fools, years younger. It was a piece of her, a fragment of our shared past. Something he would recognize, something that would make him pause, make him question. He was proud. That was the key. He wanted recognition, even if it was through fear. He wouldn't be able to resist the temptation to retrieve it, to destroy the symbol of my connection to the woman he was now using. My breath was shallow, a controlled rhythm against the rising tide of anticipation. The wind moaned through the broken panes, a mournful dirge. It felt alien, a forgotten limb. I hadn't fired it in anger and purpose since him. The memory was a dull ache, a phantom pain that resurfaced with every beat of my heart. He would come. He had to. The locket was a dare, a challenge to his carefully constructed narrative. He couldn't leave that loose end dangling. He had to reclaim his control. The silence stretched, taut and suffocating. Every creak of the old building, every gust of wind made me flinch. There was this foolishness. There was I walking into a trap of my own making. Doubt, a venomous serpent, coiled in my gut. But then I heard it. The faint, rhythmic crunch of tires on gravel growing steadily louder. Not the roar of a truck, but something smaller, more deliberate. A vehicle that could navigate the narrow access road, a flicker of movement at the edge of my vision. He was here. The dance had begun. My headlights, a pair of jaundiced eyes, cut through the oppressive dark, illuminating a landscape of hulking metal beasts and a lone, flickering neon sign promising coffee and comfort. Comfort was a lie. This was a staging ground, a forgotten corner of the world where shadows bred. The smell. It was stronger here, clinging to the damp asphalt like a second skin. It wasn't just burnt sugar. It was something chemical, something that pricked at the back of my throat. I'd smelled it before, years ago, a phantom scent that had haunted my nightmares and the crime scenes. The way the perpetrator had described it in his letters, his taunts. a signature. And now it was here, clinging to a dented midnight blue van parked a dozen rows away from my own battered sedan. Wrong truck. Right scent. My hand, calloused and steady despite the tremor that ran through my gut, tightened on the worn leather of my steering wheel. This was it. The meticulously planned heists, each one a twisted echo of the killer's past work, had led me here to this desolate patch of asphalt under a bruised sky. I slipped out of the car, the gravel crunching under my worn boots like a confession. Each step felt deliberate, a measured advance into the maw of a beast I had only ever glimpsed in the periphery. The van was nondescript, its paint chipped, its tires worn. But the scent? No movement, no telltale glint of metal, just the wind whistling a mournful tune through the gaps in the trailer doors. My gaze settled on the driver's side door. I resisted the urge to touch it, to contaminate the scene. Years of ingrained habit, of detached observation, warred with the raw, visceral need to know. I pulled on a pair of thin latex gloves, the snap of the rubber loud in the stillness. The air grew thick, charged with an invisible current. My breath hitched. This was the precipice, the point of no return. I reached for the handle. I pulled. The door swung open with a soft groan, revealing a cramped interior bathed in the weak glow of a dashboard light. The acrid, sweet scent intensified, almost overwhelming. The driver's seat was empty, but the passenger seat, it was occupied, a mannequin. Dressed in a cheap, ill-fitting suit, its painted smile a grotesque mockery of life. It was positioned as if it had been waiting, observing, and on its lap a small, ornate music box. The same kind, I realized with a sickening lurch, that had been found at the first crime scene, the one that had started it all, the one I'd never solved. My eyes darted around the van's interior. Empty soda cans, crumpled wrappers, the detritus of a solitary journey. But then my gaze snagged on something tucked beneath the passenger seat. A leather-bound journal, the same kind the killer had used to document his twisted philosophy. A glint of silver, a switchblade, its blade extended, glistening wickedly in the dim light. The scent, I now understood, was not just a signature, it was a warning. A sudden, sharp sound from behind me shattered the fragile quiet, a twig snapping. My head whipped around. Standing at the edge of the parking lot, silhouetted against the faint glow of the highway, was a figure. But the stance, the way it held its head, tilted slightly as if listening, it was familiar. Terribly, undeniably familiar. I came. A voice rasped, a dry, brittle sound like dead leaves skittering across pavement. It was a voice I hadn't heard in years, a voice that had burrowed deep into my subconscious, a constant hum of unresolved guilt. The moonlight, weak as it was, caught the glint of something metallic on its wrist. A cufflink. The same distinctive, eagle-shaped cufflinks I'd seen in the victim's belongings. The same ones I'd found in my own evidence locker, misplaced, forgotten. I knew I wouldn't be able to resist. The figure continued, a low chuckle that held no mirth. The chase, the puzzle, it always drew I in, didn't it, Cole? The world narrowed. The truck stopped parking lot, the diesel fumes, the acrid scent, it all receded, replaced by the sharp, unwavering focus on the figure before me. This wasn't just about the heists anymore. This was about the reckoning. I reached inside my jacket, my fingers closing around the cool, familiar grip of my service weapon. It felt like an extension of my own hand, a weapon I had sworn I would never wield again. But then I hadn't sworn that. I had just stopped. I've been playing games for too long, I said, my voice rough, unfamiliar. The figure stopped about 10 feet away. The moonlight finally caught its face, or rather the absence of one. A smooth, featureless mask, crafted from polished obsidian. It reflected the dim light, a perfect, unsettling mirror. Games, this is art, detective, a masterpiece in progress. The voice, though distorted by the mask, was laced with an unnerving calm. And I, my dear Cole, are merely a critic who has finally arrived at the gallery. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I had let this man, this thing, torment me for years. I had let him dismantle my life, brick by painstaking brick. No more. This masterpiece ends tonight, I declared, the words a challenge, a promise. The masked figure tilted its head again. Does it, or does it merely begin a new exhibit? And then, with a speed that belied its imposing stature, the figure moved, not towards me but towards the van. A hand reached inside, fumbling. A click. A hiss. The acrid, sweet scent exploded outwards, thick and cloying, stinging my eyes. A cloud of vapor billowed from the van, engulfing the passenger compartment. My lungs burned. My vision swam. Wait, it wasn't just a signature, it was a solvent, a corrosive agent, the music box, the journal, the switchblade. They weren't just props, they were bait. And the van was a trap. My mind raced, piecing together the fragmented clues, the subtle misdirections. The heists weren't about the money, they were about the reconstruction, recreating the scenes, luring me out. And now here I was, standing in the heart of it, breathing it all in. I stumbled back, coughing, my gloved hands flying to my mouth. My eyes watered uncontrollably. The masked figure stepped out of the van, a small glass vial clutched in its hand. The masked figure laughed, a dry, rasping sound that echoed in the vast emptiness of the truck stop parking lot. The wind howled, carrying the scent of destruction, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of doubt. Had I walked into a trap so perfectly laid, so utterly devastating that there was no escape? The masked figure raised a hand, not in surrender, but in a gesture of perverse admiration. My resolve hardened. This was not the end. It was the beginning of the fight. The masked figure laughed again, a sound like gravel grinding. The parking lot, usually a symphony of idling engines and distant highway hum, was a tomb. My weapon felt heavy, a dead weight in my hand. The wind whipped around the monolithic shapes of the parked rigs, tugging at my coat, carrying the acrid tang of spilled diesel. I thought it was him, didn't I? The voice rasped, devoid of any real mirth. The ghost, the echo. My grip tightened, silhouetted against the sickly yellow glow of a lone fluorescent bulb, took a slow step forward. The mask, a crude approximation of a clown's grinning face, seemed to mock the grim reality of the night. I've been chasing shadows, Cole. For years, he was right. I had been. Every glint of metal, every whispered rumor, every meticulously placed detail had led me back to him. The phantom who'd vanished into the city's underbelly after that last brutal job. The phantom I'd sworn to bring to justice. Who are I? I demanded, my voice a low growl trying to mask the tremor that still ran through me. A messenger, the figure replied, a slight tilt of his head. A reminder, and a final act. He gestured with a gloved hand towards the back of the truck I'd cornered. It wasn't the one I'd been tracking. The logo on its side, a stylized eagle in flight, was unfamiliar. This was the wrong truck. The realization hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. He was a construct, a convenient narrative for a city that craved a monster. My mind reeled, all for a phantom. Who built him? I asked, my gaze sweeping the deserted expanse of the truck stop parking lot. 2 a.m. wrong truck. All designed to keep the hounds on the wrong scent. If the ghost wasn't real, then who was behind this? Who had orchestrated the entire charade? And why now? You're here for the package, the figure stated, not a question. The one that connects all the threads, the one that proves the ghost was never the true architect. He took another step, and this time I saw it. A subtle bulge under his jacket. Not a weapon, but something else. Something that glinted faintly in the dim light. This is where it ends, Cole, he said. Not with a chase, but with a choice. My finger hovered over the trigger. The wind howled, a mournful dirge for all the misspent years. I had to know. The masked figure obliged. Slowly, he reached under his jacket and pulled out a small, tarnished silver locket. He held it up. My breath hitched. It was identical to the one I'd found at the first crime scene, the one that had been dismissed as a random trinket, a meaningless piece of evidence, but I knew. The one everyone forgot when the ghost took center stage. He opened the locket. Inside, 2 faded photographs stared back at me. A woman, his eyes bright with a joy that seemed impossible in this desolate place, and a younger version of myself, smiling, carefree. He wasn't a victim of the ghost, Cole, the figure said, voice hardening. He was a victim of the system, of the people who looked the other way, and the ghost. The ghost was just the cover story. The pieces, sharp and brutal, began to slot into place. The meticulously planned heists designed to distract, the careful staging of evidence to create a narrative. It wasn't about a killer, it was about a conspiracy. You're not him, I stammered, the revelation washing over me, disorienting and profound. No, the figure confirmed. I'm someone who sought justice, not vengeance. Someone who saw the truth buried under layers of deception. Someone who decided it was time to unearth it. He stepped closer, the locket still open in his hand. The weight of my weapon felt unbearable now, a symbol of my own blind pursuit. The real culprits are still out there, Cole, he replied, his gaze piercing. Protected, but this, he tapped the locket, this is the key, the proof, what you do with it now. That's your choice. Will you chase ghosts, or will you finally see the truth? The choice was stark. My entire career, my identity, had been built on the pursuit of the ghost. But the locket, the faded photographs, the words spoken in the hushed stillness of the truck stop parking lot, 2 a.m. wrong truck, were shattering that foundation. The resolution wasn't in apprehending a phantom. It was in exposing the rot. And for the first time, I felt a flicker of something other than doubt. A grim, resolute purpose.